You're listening to the audio portion of Workshop Wednesdays. Workshop Wednesdays is a free live discussion about topics affecting accountants, bookkeepers, and business owners. You can join the ABO group in Facebook to participate live Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Just search for ABBO in Facebook. This podcast is brought to you by Schoolofbookkeeping.com, where you will learn, grow, and build a thriving bookkeeping practice. We have hundreds of lessons with almost every aspect of the industry. Start your free month today at Schoolofbookkeeping.com. Oh, welcome to another Workshop Wednesdays, where it's casual conversations for serious workflows, brought to you by Schoolofbookkeeping.com, where you can keep learning QuickBooks your way. There we go. How fancy. I am exhausted. I am sorry, Rachel, for kind of lost my voice.
You've only been driving cross country and you just went to the Super Bowl where you presumably screamed and out of joy because your team won.
Yes, yay, Eagles.
Go Eagles! I was rooting for the Eagles.
Good for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we started our trek from the Seattle area, and to ultimately ending up in Florida. And so by the map, it's 4,000 miles, by the way, how we were going. Started mid-January, making our way there. And as fortune or timing would have it, happened to be going by the New Orleans area last weekend. Things turned up the way they did, and we were able to go to the Super Bowl. So check that off the bucket list.
Yeah, the universe rewarded you. That's cool.
Going to the Super Bowl at face value. Yeah, so it wasn't like we had to buy the $25,000 tickets that
and your team won. That's really incredible. That I was rooting for the Lions. Unfortunately, they made it far, but they couldn't beat. I think the Commanders got them.
The Commanders got the better of them the week before. They would have faced the Eagles in the NFC Championship, so that would have been an interesting dynamic, especially since my son was all about the Detroit this year.
And oh yeah, he knows what's up.
Thank you, Jamie. She says, "Go Birds."
Yes, and I'm so glad Jamie's here because Jamie, this topic
is for you.
Yes.
Before we get into the topic of the day, which is all about the Intuit logins and managing those things, we did want to talk about a little bit about some news to update you on. And that is all. And it seems like anytime we talk about Intuit or QuickBooks news, we're talking about pricing. So that's what we're going to talk about, is the new pricing for QuickBooks Enterprise. I did create a blog, so that's available there. Oh, I got a QR code for that. It's here.
Oh boy, and I have to ask. Oh, you're saying it. You just answered my question. Desktop enterprise pricing.
Desktop enterprise, because we have no idea what the Intuit enterprise cost actually is, because that's a negotiation back and forth, multi-touch type of subscription. So with QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise, there is some pricing updates. Now, traditionally, they have a pricing increase every year, and it's normally around 5% year over year. So this year, a little bit different. So the Enterprise Silver, Gold, and Platinum, there is a 15% increase for seats 1 through 5. So I want to make sure that we're clear. When you purchase an Enterprise subscription, a QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise subscription, I have to be very specific now when we're talking about that. You purchase a multi-user license, meaning the number of maximum concurrent users that can access a company file at any given time, right? So when this says there's a 15% bump for seats 1 through 5, that's if you have a subscription that has 1 through 5 seats. Doesn't mean that there is a different subscription cost for seats 6 through 30. It just means that if you have a 9-user license, you are going to see a 20% increase year over year for your desktop subscription. Now, Enterprise Diamond is only getting, I say only, a flat 15% increase for across the whole board there. If you have a high usage multi-user license for any of the precious metals, silver, gold, or platinum, you're going to see a 20% year over year. Now, when do you see that increase? That on your next annual renewal date, even if you're paying monthly. So these prices went into effect February 1st, but if you purchased your enterprise subscription in January, you're not going to see that increase until the following January, so January 2026. Because you purchase an annual subscription, even if you're paying monthly.
So they're not going to charge you back for the prior February through December. It'll just be because you bill ahead, right? You bill. If I'm paying now, it'll be for the next year.
Exactly. Yeah, it won't see your increase until that anniversary of your annual subscription. There's also, and we talked about this a little bit before, that there is the per employee and multi-company changes to the terms and conditions, but there's no details about what those changes actually are. You just have to accept the terms, so that if there is a change to the per employee cost or the multi-company cost, they'll notify you. So that's that.
That's what you were talking about on the Power Hour the other day.
Yeah. Now, all of this is encouragement. I think what they're trying to do is use pricing to shake loose people who are sticking in desktop that don't necessarily need to be, right? And they're using pricing as a way to make people uncomfortable enough to evaluate if QuickBooks Online is a viable option. And we're here to help here at School of Bookkeeping. If you feel that, hey, now's the time to switch from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, we have a bundle with School of Bookkeeping where you get our tutorials and elite membership in School of Bookkeeping. You can ask questions. And if you get the advanced subscription bundle, we'll do the movement for you. You can send us the file and we'll move your data into QuickBooks Online. You'll have the quick answers so that you can ask those post-conversion questions, and we'll help you on your way. And you never have to talk to Intuit if you don't want to.
And if you're doing something like e-commerce or any of those things where you need additional help too, I know, Dan, you recently set up some of those courses, so there's all kinds of help available.
But I have seen a lot of people being oversold enterprise, so this will certainly wake them up. To say, hey, I'm not using half of these things. If you're using the advanced inventory and payroll inside of your QuickBooks Desktop, by all means, stay there. And it's probably you're going to, when you do that cost analysis of, is this worthwhile? By the time you add on the additional applications and those types of things in order to do the same thing that you're doing in one software, you're probably going to find out that's not the best thing to do. But if you're if you're thinking about moving to QuickBooks Online, and this is the trigger event that's causing that, we can help you do that.
Yeah, so, and do make sure that you ask Dan potentially for some of those things, because there are certain things that cannot be done in QuickBooks Online, like kidding, and I'm living this nightmare right now. So there are some instances to stay in desktop or enterprise if that really does work for you. So talk to an expert.
Exactly. Let me stop sharing there. Now, what we're going to talk about, really what we were going to talk about today, is all about the Intuit login and managing the Intuit login. Because when I worked at Intuit, it was a common call where there's all sorts of things that have to deal with your login, because especially with QuickBooks Online, that is the installation, the storage, and that's the way to access your QuickBooks is through a login. So lots of times people would contact, and if it was something as simple as I need to reset my password or change my email or do all those sorts of things. But by and large, there was a large bit of confusion about the makeup of the login. And some of it was self-sabotage at Intuit. They would call and use terminology that was interchangeable and those types of things. So I created a login guide, and I've got a little QR code over there. It'll take you to our blog about the whole thing. I'm going to pull that up here real quickly because I didn't have it ready.
I needed that a long time ago because I have had so many problems with this login.
Yes.
Although now it's working.
And you're not alone, because, and I'm in the same boat because I have 15,000 logins for Intuit from the time that I have worked there to the time that I haven't worked there. And I can't find it now. Oh, where is it? I've been scrolling. There it is. Let me share my screen again. Oop, there we go. All right, so we've created a complete guide to signing in and accessing your account. I did a QuickBooks Power Hour about this last year, right before QuickBooks Connect, and a couple of years like, thank you for doing that. So really, the thing is, what we want to unpack here is the makeup of a login, right? So a login is, and I try to explain it here, it's like a driver's license, right? If you want to drive, you need a driver's license, but you also need a car, right? So the login is not your car, right? So the login is just your driver's license. It gives you access to be able to buy a car. And that car may be QuickBooks Online. That car may be, I think I put down here, this could be QuickBooks Payroll. It could be QuickBooks Time. It could be MailChimp. It could be Intuit Online Payroll. There's all sorts of different cars that you can drive, but that key that puts the key into the ignition or lets you at least into the car is that login. And there's four parts of that login that we want to unpack here. And there's a login name, an email address, other personal contact information like your phone number, address, those types of things, and a password. That's really it. Those are the only things that make up an Intuit login. Now that login can access multiple cars, as the case may be, but if you are logged in to one of these services and then you try to access another service that you would want to have a different login to, your computer doesn't know any different and it will try to access the login that you either last used or last logged into to that service. And that's where people get things pretty wonky. I think that's the technical term for it.
Wait, can I ask you a question? Are you talking about if I were a business owner and I was logging into my QuickBooks, that same login, I could get into all these other things, MailChimp, Credit Karma, et cetera, et cetera. You're not referring to online accountant at all right now, right?
No. I'm talking about Intuit in general always had this concept of having one login, right? Like you only
Yeah.
need to be one person, right?
Yes.
and that actually the tool that they used was called OI, OI,
Oh,
which stood
okay.
for One Intuit Identity, right? So
Okay.
that was the whole idea, is that you only needed one Intuit identity to do all of these things. The problem is that a lot of different logins are acquired, right?
Mm-hmm.
Intuit did not create MailChimp, right?
Mm-hmm.
MailChimp created MailChimp. Now Intuit bought MailChimp. So now all of those people who had a MailChimp login now have a separate Intuit login, as opposed to the one Intuit login that they started with, right?
Yeah, because I log in
Um,
with a separate, but oh
and that's
man,
what
yeah.
happens a lot of times, is that Intuit Online Payroll, it originally was PayCycle. They acquired the
Mm,
company. Mint, they acquired the
yeah.
company. You see a
Yeah,
pattern
because
here.
that was my problem originally is I was a Mint user before
Yeah,
for a long time, for years before I ended up working in
right,
QBO. And so my login thing was all goofed up because of
right.
the Mint with the personal, and oh man. I could
And this is,
I could talk a whole course just on my own personal journey.
I'm sure, and I've been a part of that too. Uh, and this is where it gets confusing sometimes, is because some of those other logins were only an email address was your login name, right? That's what you
That
logged in
was
with,
my issue. Yep,
was your email address.
exactly.
In the, I can't think of the word, in the makeup, we'll just say, in the parts of an Intuit login, there is a separate field for login name as there is for email address.
Mm,
So the only thing that needs to be unique when you create a login is the login name. Typically, a login name or an email address is unique to you, Rachel, right? Like you have your email address. However, when we have all of these different potential login portals now coming into the the Intuit family of logins, then that gets confusing, because Mint, as you have pointed out, that's what you used, was your email address to sign into Mint. If you already had a login at Intuit that was your email address, now
yeah.
you've got a conflict. Or now you've got a login conflict. So now that Intuit login that was Mint now needs to become an Intuit login, and it can't, because there's now two Rachels in
Yeah.
the Intuit, and
It
now
was
there's not one Intuit identity, there's two Intuit identities, and each of them is now assigned to something else. Now, a login, what were you saying? What were you going to say there?
no, I was just gonna say Mint's gone away. I'm sure that problem is probably gone. But yeah, if
Yeah.
for a while there it was really confusing because, and I'm sure a lot of people out there have done the same thing in that they've created two identities,
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying. And so then maybe they're having trouble with one and then they call support seeing the other one. And yeah, there's all sorts of crazy things that could then stem from two
Right.
identities.
Yeah, I was just dealing with one this past week where they typoed their phone number. So their MFA codes were going to, multi-factor authentication codes were going to a non-existent phone number,
Yeah,
so
I've
they
done that
could never
before.
sign.
Yep. I also
They
did
could
that
not
with
sign.
Microsoft with Office 365. I did the wrong email address, so it was like off by
Yeah,
a digit. So I screwed that up too. So
yeah,
yeah, it's really important to get that stuff right.
right. So just the fundamentals here is that this login name has to be something that's unique. And then once that login touches a service, then that's the login that's forever tied to that service. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't fix it, right? So it's just the first time that you touch a service with a login, that's the login that you need to use. Your login name and your email address may be the very same thing. It could, your email address, whatever that is, mine's dan@danwith.com, that login and that email address may be the same thing. They may be different. What's really confusing is when you have a login name that is an email address, but it's not the contact email address for the login. I'm looking at you, Rachel.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. Ugh.
You had a personal Gmail address, which was your login name, but your business email address was the contact name. So
Yeah.
we have a question of the day that came in from our quick answers, and that is, here we go, the Q of the D here. How do I change the email address that is associated when my clients email QBO invites? Right. So that's simple enough, is to be able to change your email address. And where you do that is, I'm trying to scroll on my screen share. It's not moving. It's over here. There we go. So way down here in the article, we talk about ways to manage and make those changes. Primary admin disputes or changing the primary admin. That's all accessible in here. And then, of course, if you have questions, you can ask the books bot over here in the corner, and that will get a hold of us if you have specific questions. But
can you put that link, Dan, in the?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, you did. Okay.
No, I had it ready.
Oh.
But I didn't.
Yeah, because the reason that I say so is, do you know how many people tell me that they just sit, like waiting for support with this kind of stuff? And if there's a way that they can get these step-by-step instructions and go in and do it themselves rather than be sent on a wild goose chase, I'm actually going to bookmark this myself now.
Now, there's a big difference between your login and what QuickBooks calls a persona, right? Or Intuit calls a persona. So when you sign into something, whatever that is, you are given access to that. When you tie a login to a service, right? And we're just going to talk about QuickBooks Online for today. So when you get an invitation, you are granted a persona, right? So somebody invites you as an accountant, you are given that accountant user persona. And then when you get that invitation, and you accept that invitation under a login, now that login is tied to that persona, right? So there's some common personas, right, of the primary admin, which we've all probably had a horrible experience of either giving or getting or transferring the primary admin. Because the primary admin is there's a fundamental thing here. The primary admin is the first user to sign in to any service, right? If you're creating a QuickBooks Online subscription for your clients, you are the primary admin, right? So you're doing that inside of your QBOA. Now you have that checkbox that says, make my client the primary admin, which kind of puts that primary admin in limbo. What it does is it sends the user or whoever the email address that you tell, which is the client, an email that they have to acknowledge before they become the primary admin. But under normal circumstances, the first person to sign in to any service, in this case QuickBooks Online, is the primary admin, right? And normally the definition at Intuit is that's the owner of the product or service. There can only be one primary admin, right? You can have other company admins that have all the access with the exception of modifying who the primary admin is.
Right.
Only the primary admin can delegate that. They can only change their own password. They can only grant other people to be the primary admin. So that's one of those common personas that various Intuit sites and services are going to have. So any kind of change to the subscription, billing, all that information is going to come to the primary admin, typically only, right? So that's why it's important. And then when it comes to disputes, Intuit is going to lean on whoever is the primary admin, which may or may not be the owner of the company.
Mhm.
So when you're dealing with, hey, I've created a QuickBooks Online subscription, and the accountant created the subscription, they're the primary admin, they're no longer accessible. Either I've had many horror stories of accountant passed away.
Yeah, I've heard
or
all kinds of stuff too. Yeah.
or there's a disgruntled employee that was
Yeah.
delegated to create the QuickBooks Online subscription or any other service, and then they're no longer with the company. That's a defunct email.
Yeah.
That's when things get tricky, and QuickBooks legally has segregated the primary admin as the owner of the company. So if you come in and say, hey, this is my company, you just have to prove that. And that's a
Yeah.
legal process of uploading all sorts of documents and those types of things. So at the bottom of this article is all about how do you change the primary admin when the admin's not
Oh, that's good. Because yeah, I
responsive.
actually was curious about that. I never really had a situation where it escalated that far in that somebody had to prove, but I was always wondering how you would do that. Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's a legal
Yes,
process.
you can't just say, hey,
It's
like,
a
let
legal
me have
process.
access to,
So that means that
you can't just say, yeah, like I need access to this sensitive financial information. It's privileged information.
I've heard both sides of the story, and both sides were right.
Yeah.
Right? You can't just take it from somebody. It has to be granted.
Yeah.
And when that person is not available to grant it, then they have to make their due diligence to try to contact the person who is listed as the primary admin. If they can make a claim the other way, then of course it goes back and forth. And typically when it's somebody who's not responsive or the email's defunct or something like that, then the 3-day window will pass, and then they'll just move on to the next step. And then ultimately you get your company back when that's the case.
Yeah, and there's in like a couple of my communities, like we've talked about the best practice as if you're a QBO accountant and you are bringing people in, because we have incentives to create QuickBooks accounts for business owners and that kind of thing. So I do all the time, but I usually will transfer that primary admin over to them right away, just so I don't ever forget. That's just part of the process. And then that way we really don't ever have that situation. I don't want to be hijack somebody's information forever and then they can't, for some reason they have to leave. They should be able to have access to their information.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're a company admin, which typically is a normal circumstance, normally this comes up when the firm is paying for the description or subscription of the QuickBooks Online, where it's a firm build. Because when you transfer the primary admin to the client and you're paying for the subscription, they can take over the management of the subscription and then kick you out.
That's right.
That's one
so
possibility.
If you're doing firm build, then you stick as the primary admin. So I don't do that
typically,
anymore.
typically that's the case, but you don't have to, right? So,
Oh, okay.
So when you're doing firm build, and this is a specific situation where, as your firm, you're managing the subscription costs. When it's under firm build, the client can be the primary admin, and you cannot. Well, actually, no accountant user can be removed while it's in that condition, right? So, as long as the firm it's under firm bill, where a firm is paying for the subscription, and not the end direct bill to the user, no accountants can be deleted, not even firms that aren't in the firm, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've invited the tax accountant, and
so an accountant would have to regain primary admin and then remove accountants.
No,
Oh.
actually, nobody can be removed, even if they are the primary admin.
I see. Okay.
It's when it's in that condition. Now, the
Okay.
caveat here is if the client is the primary admin and the firm is doing the firm build, the client can take over the billing from the firm. So you have that choice. Of course, they lose all the discounts and anything else that goes with it. But then they're the primary admin, and they're also direct billed through Intuit. Then they can delete customers or accountants all they want. But they're paying for the subscription at that point, and they're able to do that. But if it's in that condition where the firm build for anybody, nobody can delete an accountant user.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And I realize I do have a few that are still firm build, but I don't do that anymore now. Now they've switched things around a little bit, and now I do. Yeah. But but I do. Yeah, I still do. But I do. There's a lot of people that I know that still do a hefty firm build amount for their clients.
Yeah.
Mine's a little bit different, but
and there's two sides of that coin, depending on pros and cons. Either way, it's just as long as you know what you're in for, then typically that's the case. Now, getting back to our question, how do I change the email address that is associated when the clients email the QBO invite? So a lot of accountants will go into their QBOA and change their email address in QBOA, thinking that will answer this question. And it does not. Right? I'm not staring at you, but I'm just saying that a lot of accountants do that, and it's not, and you're not alone in that thought process. Because that email address is tied to the persona of that subscription, right? So we're talking about what access that you have to what services. That login or that email address is only tied to that service, right? So if you change it there, you're only changing it in whatever it is that you're changing it in. So that could be in your QBOA or in your payments account or whatever. Changing contact information there is only changing it in that service. You have.
Well, then why do they allow you to change your contact information in there?
Because if you're going to get an email from that service, then that's where it's going to go to, right?
Yeah.
If there is a CC or an email sent out
that's
for
true.
invoicing and those types of things, that's where you want that to go. Right?
Yeah.
Because the driver's license or the key in the ignition is your login, that's where you change the email address. And you do that at QuickBooks.com's account. So that's where you want to go to manage your login, is directly by logging into just the login, right? Very similar to managing your Apple ID or managing your Google account. You would go into accounts, google.com, or Apple ID. I don't even know what the the place to manage your Apple ID is.
iCloud.
Yeah. In there.
So would you say that, because I'm thinking of my Apple ID, which my Apple ID is an email address. Would
right.
you say, just as a general rule, because now I've obviously learned my lesson with all of this, and
I didn't
with
mean to wag
Apple
the
ID.
finger. It just came out that way.
No, but would you say that it's best to, when it's asking you to create a username, create an actual username, don't use an email address? Would you say that's the best?
Yes, that makes best sense, because that way you can keep them separate.
Yeah, because I realized looking back, that's been my source of confusion for a lot of different logins, is that I used an email address, or it'll say create a username and I'll just put my email address.
Right.
And because I'm thinking it's going to be easier, but in reality, it's not. It's a lot more convoluted, and I've just created a big problem.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just logging in here. I just didn't want to actually get logged in. It did. Okay, dang it. Okay, Intuit Account Manager. I'm going to click here. And this is where things get confusing, right? Let's get you into it. Let's get you into it. Why do they say that twice? And then it asks phone number, email, or user ID.
Yeah.
If you have multiple login names that are tied to the same email address, don't use the email address in this field. Because even though it says email or user ID, if you enter in an email address, so if I just choose this, dan@completebusinessgroup.com, I may have multiple Intuit logins tied to that email address, but it's only going to sign me into the one that is the login name of dan@completebusinessgroup.com.
Yeah, that just confused me. I don't think I understood what you just said, but that's okay. I understand high level.
All right. Well, this is what I was getting to the question of the day, where he was talking about how do I change the email address. There it is. Okay. We kept clicking on the same thing. How do I change the email address that is associated when clients email the QBO invite, right? So when you are invited to QuickBooks Online, the only information that the client enters in is first name, last name, and email address, right? So what's going to happen is there's going to be an email invitation sent to you, and that email is going to then allowed to be associated with a login. However, it's only going to allow you to associate that invite to a login that has the same email address attached to it, right? If somebody invites me to dan@completebusinessgroup.com, I'm only going to be able to assign a login that is assigned to dan@completebusinessgroup.com as a contact email address for that login.
Okay.
If my normal QBOA, or my primary admin login of my QuickBooks Online accountant, is associated with a different email address than what they've invited me to, I'm going to have some problems.
Yeah, that's where I've gone. Yeah, that's where things have gone south for me before, is because I've had them invite me into the wrong thing. Right. But I've now gotten it straightened out. I know you're relieved.
So the way to manage your contact information is when you get signed in, then you can manage the user ID, the login ID, the email address, and the phone number. Mm-hmm. Caveat there is knowing which login you're actually in at that point. So when you have, user ID is something that needs to be unique, but email address and phone number do not have to be, right? So what I used to tell people is that you put in the email address, or there used to be a way on this screen that to say, I forgot my user ID, in which case you would put in your email address, and then it would send you a link or a list of all of the logins that are tied to that email address. Doesn't do that anymore. You have to put in the phone number.
Oh.
So when you put in the phone number there, then it's going to do the same thing. It's going to send you a list of all of the logins that are tied to that phone number.
Okay.
And then at that point, you can decide, okay, this is the login that I use for all of everything else. That's the login that I need to associate with this invitation.
Okay, now that makes perfect sense, because what you're saying, because
there's a light bulb going
changed, because I changed my username on my main computer, but on my laptop and other places I log in where I have my login credentials stored, I have actually that email address that still lets me get in because it has the email address stored in there. And I was like, I didn't put in my new username here. I wonder why it's still letting me log in with these same credentials, because I can log in with the email address, the username, or the phone number.
Yeah.
So I didn't necessarily have to update that. So I can use different things to log in, and it won't get confused.
Yeah. So to answer this question of how do I change the email address that's associated when clients email QBO invites, first you want to make sure that login is tied to your QBOA. And then you go to QuickBooks.com/accounts, sign in with that login, and change the email address that's associated with that login. Then when you get the invitation to that new email address, then you can just log in using the same login that you wanted to use before. It will just then, because that login's already attached to your QuickBooks Online accountant, so then you'll just accept that invitation because it's now come to the new and improved email address. You'll accept the invitation, you'll put it to the firm. Everybody is happy.
Yes, thrilled.
But you're not alone in this confusion, because it is quite challenging to get these logins straight, especially when there's so many different ways to mess it up. But best practice, like you had said, don't use an email address as your login name if you have multiple logins.
Right. Yeah, because that's, I think, caused a lot of confusion for me for a long time. In my situation, it was like extra confusing in the beginning because I had been using Mint under one email address, and then I tried to set up QBOA, and I kept having people tell me to still use my Mint login because I only wanted one login, but I had already created another one, and oh boy. And that was the email address that I was still using for some time. And remember, I thought that was my username, but it really wasn't my username. We got that squared away. But anyway.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so that is, now going back to the other example that I was using where they typoed their phone number, it was not letting them log in at all. Even though they could get a code emailed to them, it still wanted a code to go to the phone number. For some reason, there was like a two-factor authentication. In their case, the best option for them was to start a new login, but the caveat to that is that their logins would be, if there was any other services that was tied to that original login, they would lose it, right? Because that login is now not able. But in their case, it was okay. But their caveat was, hey, I want to use the same email address. then that gets a little more it gets a little more complicated, and we'll probably need to have a special workshop about how to use the same email address but two different login names for that
Yeah,
same email address.
because I know there's people that have lost their entire QBOA and like access to all of their clients, and there's horror stories out there. So
Yeah.
I know people are really scared to make any changes to that. Yeah, I couldn't even begin to know how any of that would work.
Yeah. And it's all for good reason, right? Because there's so much personally identifiable information, especially tied to, potentially your taxes,
Oh
your
yeah.
your business, your banking information, and the more that QuickBooks is getting into doing money movement,
Mm-hmm.
it is getting, to the point where I remember when QBOA first came out, the main solve that they were trying to solve for is to stop having accountants use their client's login.
Right.
Because that's what they
Right.
were doing, is they would just
Yep.
borrow their login and then just sign in. So, okay, you need a separate login here,
Yeah.
and you got to stop doing that. And that's what QBOA evolved from,
Yeah.
is this trying to separate that people need to have separate logins and stop
Yep.
sharing all
And
this
that's
stuff.
super important, as most of us are working in the cloud and we're all using cloud-based software now. We're not users in desktop software. So you really have to make sure that when you're dealing with several different QBOA file or QBO files of your clients and that kind of thing, you're not logging in as them. You're logging in as you and all of their other things. This is a huge topic for anybody running a firm or an employee in a firm or managing a firm or anybody doing anything in financial software based in the cloud. It's a big deal, big topic.
Yeah. And if you're not using once it's segregated and separated, and you know what key goes into which car, then things seem to work pretty well. So that's, if you have any questions, go to our blog there, reach out to the book spot there. We can certainly maybe help clarify anything that might be there, if you do have some confusion, because this has been a confusing topic for decades, and is only going to continue to be more confusing as more sites and services get thrown into this one Intuit identity mix.
Yeah. Thank
um,
goodness you're an expert, because people
right.
need experts out there and you're an incredible resource.
All right. We'll see you next time on the Workshop Wednesday. Next week, we are going to wait. Where's my schedule? Well, now it's all gone. What are we talking about next week? Next
I
week,
don't
we're
know,
going to
I'm
be.
on vacation.
You're on vacation. Yeah, we're just going to be talking about the double-sided coin of Intuit, right? So whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. Is there grass greener somewhere else? We don't know.
Mm.
So
I
join
do
us
have
next
some
week.
things to say about that, but you'll have to.
Maybe you can phone them in. We'll just have a cutout of Rachel, and we'll pretend that you're talking on the workshop.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you next week. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you next time on the workshop. And that wraps up another insightful episode of Workshop Wednesday, brought to you by Schoolofbookkeeping.com. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion and took away some valuable tips and strategies to enhance your bookkeeping practice. Remember, if you want to stay ahead in the world of bookkeeping and accounting, be sure to visit Schoolofbookkeeping.com. With a wide range of courses, resources, and expert guidance, you'll find everything you need to sharpen your skills and boost your career. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. Your reviews help us reach more listeners and continue to bring you the best content every week. If you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, reach out to us on social media or send us an email at support@schoolofbookkeeping.com. We love hearing from our listeners and are always looking for new ideas to explore. Thanks for tuning in to Workshop Wednesday. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep excelling in your bookkeeping journey. I'm Dan DeLong, and we'll see you next week.